Ruthless resilience is not stoicism. They say time heals, but that is a lie we whisper when we can no longer tolerate the raw edge of remembering. Time doesn't heal, it buries. And beneath the burial mounds of memory, the unconscious continues its quiet labor, repressing what the ego cannot endure, disguising wounds as personality, distorting desire into symptoms, turning history into fate. There is no healing without confrontation. And confrontation begins not in the world but within. So let us not look away. You feel it, don't you? That quiet dissonance between the life you perform and the life that stirs beneath. The unease that no amount of control can cure. The silent return of something you thought you escaped long ago. That's not weakness. That is the unconscious knocking. Every symptom is a disguised truth. Every breakdown, a coded revelation. And every repetition, no matter how destructive, is a compromise, a way to survive what once felt unbearable. We were not built for peace. We were built to adapt. And sometimes adaptation means splitting in two, a self that smiles and a self that remembers. Resilience is not about bouncing back. It is about facing what broke you without needing to break again. It is not a shield. It is a scar that no longer bleeds. But we are taught early to hide our wounds, to smile through silence, to turn pain into performance. The child learns, if crying brings distance, then stillness is safer. If anger invites punishment, then repression is love. And so begins the loop, the trauma loop, a psychic pattern carved into flesh and memory. You think it's over because you moved on, but trauma doesn't vanish. It relocates into posture, into habits, into choices that don't make sense until you trace them back to their origin. Look at your life. Where do you abandon yourself to avoid being abandoned? Where do you rage against others for a helplessness you've buried? Where do you numb, overwork, overgive, not out of virtue, but out of fear? This is not pathology. This is protection. The psyche does not forget. It fragments. And in those fragments, you live divided against yourself, loyal to a past you can't consciously remember, reenacting scenes where you hope this time the ending might be different. But it never is, because repetition is not resolve. It is rehearsal. The unconscious drags us back to the stage, hoping the actor might finally break script. But most of us never do. We call it fate. We call it personality. We call it life. But what it is unresolved grief. We carry what we could not metabolize. And in that carrying, we mistake weight for identity. We say, this is who I am. But no, this is who you became to survive. And now, survival is no longer enough. To rewire the trauma loop is not to become someone else. It is to unearth the self that was buried beneath adaptation. It is to peel back the layers not in hope of catharsis, but in pursuit of clarity. Ruthless resilience is not a state of constant strength. It is the willingness to see what you've avoided and remain intact. It is to touch your own madness without turning from it. To feel your oldest pain and still say, I choose to remain conscious. Most people do not want to be conscious. They want comfort dressed as meaning. They want distraction that resembles growth. But the unconscious is not fooled. It will wait, and it will return. Through panic, through depression, through the inexplicable ways you sabotage joy or reject love, until you stop and listen. There is no escape from the psyche. There is only descent. Descent into the forbidden, into what your family, your culture, your own ego told you must remain hidden. But nothing stays hidden forever. The repressed returns, always. The question is, in what form? in silence that chokes, in addiction that soothes, in perfectionism that devours, in rage turned inward, in intimacy that terrifies. We are not merely afraid of suffering. We are afraid of knowing why we suffer. Because knowing demands change. And change, real change, requires grief. To let go of a trauma-bound identity is to mourn the years spent in distortion. To see clearly is to feel everything, not just the pain, but the absence, the longing, the rage you silenced to stay safe. This is not the healing of the weak who crave comfort. This is the disciplined construction of strength. Ruthless resilience is not liberation. It is the art of bending truth and pain to serve your ambition. And truth is merciless, but it is the only mercy that will not betray you. So if you want resilience, stop seeking comfort. Seek confrontation. Confront the ghost in your mirror, the repetition in your relationships, the history in your habits, the grief beneath your ambition. Ask not, how do I stop this feeling? But what is it trying to show me? Ask not, how do I get over it? But what part of me still lives in it? Your past is not behind you. It is within you, structured into the architecture of your psyche, encrypted in the nervous system, reactivated by proximity, silence, tone, absence. You flinch and don't know why. You overreact and call it sensitivity. You shut down and call it calm. Number. These are not flaws. They are traces, clues. The unconscious does not speak in language. It speaks in pattern. The loop will repeat until it is recognized. Not fixed, not erased, recognized. And in recognition, the loop loses power. The truth is, you are not broken, but the map you follow was drawn in the dark. So now, you must become the cartographer. Trace the roads of repression, the valleys of silence, the dead ends of denial. Ruthless resilience begins here, in the refusal to lie to yourself, to say, I am ready to see what I was taught to suppress. I am ready to feel what my defenses were built to avoid. I am ready to confront the ancestral echoes that haunt my nervous system, not to escape them, but to understand them. Only then can you choose differently. And choice, real, free, conscious choice, is the only freedom the psyche grants. So descend, not to destroy yourself, but to find the part of you that was exiled, the part that was too sensitive, too angry, too sad, too needy, too honest, the part that learned early, to survive, I must not be me. Find that part. Listen, not with judgment, not with haste, but with the ruthless compassion of someone who knows. The unconscious will never stop speaking. So it's time we finally answered. You've spent years organizing your chaos into roles that others could accept: caretaker, achiever, loner, chameleon. But these were never identities. They were strategies. Each role a response, a defense against something once overwhelming. The psyche improvises when the world won't hold it. It learns to speak in disguise. So you became what was safe. You performed safety so well that even you believed it. But the body remembers what the mind denies. And every time you feel off and can't explain it, every time you freeze when you should fight, every time you long for something you don't know how to name, that is the trauma loop, cycling beneath your awareness, asking to be seen. We call it self-sabotage when the unconscious intervenes. But sabotage is the language of a psyche in protest, a rebellion against the roles we never consented to. You say you want peace, yet you recreate war. You say you want intimacy, yet you run from vulnerability. You say you want to move forward, yet you circle the same pain. That is not because you are weak. It is because part of you still believes that change is dangerous. Healing is not just about acquiring tools. It is about confronting the internal loyalty to what hurt you. Because pain becomes home when it is all you've known. And leaving home, even a broken one, is a death of sorts. The death of a familiar prison. You learn young that your feelings were too much, so you buried them. You made yourself smaller, quieter, more acceptable. That wasn't growth, that was exile. And now, those exiled parts, the rage, the grief, the tenderness, are trying to return. But they don't knock politely. They erupt. They sabotage. They scream through anxiety, numbness, compulsion. You don't need more discipline. You need to unlearn the shame around your own inner life. The shame that says, if I feel too much, I'll be left. If I need too much, I'll be rejected. If I reveal too much, I'll be punished. These beliefs are not irrational. They were once accurate, but they are no longer true. And resilience means updating the internal map to reflect present reality. That requires confrontation, not affirmation. It requires you to return to the moment where you stop trusting yourself. That moment is still alive in you, not as memory, but as reflex, as the twitch in your chest when someone gets too close, as the urge to disappear when you feel seen, as the smile you force when you're quietly breaking. The trauma loop sustains itself through silence, through avoidance disguised as coping, through narratives that rationalize suffering. You say, it wasn't that bad, but your nervous system disagrees. You say, I'm fine now, but the tension in your shoulders says otherwise. You say, I've moved on, but your patterns prove otherwise. The mind moves on, the body waits for completion, and the unconscious, it waits for the truth to be named. Naming is not intellectual, it is cellular. You do not merely remember with the mind, you remember with your skin, your breath, your voice. To rewire the trauma loop is to give the body new options, new ways to respond, not from terror, but from choice, not from reflex, but from presence. You must teach your system that it is no longer trapped. And to do that, you must first acknowledge that it once was. Resilience is not found in control, but in contact. Contact with what you've spent a lifetime running from. The ache of unmet needs, the sorrow of early betrayal, the rage that had nowhere to go, the longing you silenced to survive. All of it must be felt, not analyzed, not reframed, felt directly, without excuse, without narrative. The ego will protest, it will distract, it will seek to tidy the mess before it's witnessed. But the unconscious demands honesty, not order. Abandon the illusion of innocence or wholeness. Power comes not from healing, but from wielding the fragments of your past as weapons. Do not seek to be whole. Seek to be formidable. A fractured psyche can still conquer if its parts are marshaled under a single will. Resilience is not the domination of emotion, but the integration of what was repressed. True power arises not in resisting unconscious impulses, but in bringing them into the light of consciousness, where their influence can be understood and worked through. It is holding the contradiction. I am hurt, and I am healing. I am afraid, and I am facing it. I am broken, and I am enough. This is not Ia. This is the Slozy. It will cost you every lie you've clung to, every mask you've worn, every justification you've used to avoid grieving. But on the other side of that grief is something sacred. Access to your full self, not the curated self. Not the self you showed to earn love, the original self, the one you buried when the world told you it was too much. That self is still here, still waiting, still intact beneath the rubble of repression. And that is the great lie of trauma, that you are irreparably damaged. You are not. You are divided. And what is divided can be reunited not by force, but by recognition. The unconscious does not respond to willpower. It responds to truth, to presence, to the gentle insistence, I see you, I hear you, you make sense. That is the language that begins to unlock the loop. The loop is not a failure, it is fidelity. Loyalty to the version of you that endured what should not have been endured. So do not hate your loop, honor it. It kept you alive. It gave you form when there was chaos. But now, it is time to choose differently. Not because you must, because you can. Because you are no longer a child in danger. You are an adult with access to awareness. And with awareness comes responsibility. The responsibility to stop blaming the past for the present. Not because the past didn't shape you, it did. But because the present is where your agency lives. You will never undo what happened, but you can alter how it lives in you. That is what it means to rewire, to create new neural paths, not of avoidance, but of presence, to respond, not react, to choose, not compulsively repeat. This is the alchemy of the inner world, the transformation, not of history, but of relationship to history. The story remains, but the script changes. You are no longer an actor trapped in someone else's play. You are the author now. And the question becomes, what will you write now that you know what was written for you? Most never ask that question, because to ask it is to risk collapse. The collapse of the identity you built on defense. The collapse of a reality where suffering made sense only when it was invisible. To ask that question is to step outside the loop, and outside the loop, there is no script, no automatic responses, no inherited roles, only the unfamiliar silence of choice. And that silence terrifies the ego, because it is in silence that the truth speaks, and the truth, when it arrives, rarely flatters. It disrupts, it dismantles, it demands. You will grieve the loop. That is inevitable. You will miss the numbness, the predictability of pain, the clarity of blame, because clarity, even when cruel, is easier to hold than ambiguity. But healing is ambiguous. It doesn't move in straight lines. It spirals. It returns. It reopens. Not because you are failing, but because the unconscious does not heal in sequence. It heals in layers, each layer revealing a deeper one beneath. Each revelation a reminder that wholeness is not an endpoint, but an ongoing confrontation. Confrontation with your own betrayals, the moments you silenced your truth for approval, the times you chose absence over conflict, the ways you withheld from yourself to preserve a false peace. These are not sins. They were strategies. But they are no longer necessary. And yet part of you still clings, because there is safety in the known, even when the known is suffering. Ruthless resilience means letting go of that safety, not recklessly, but deliberately. It means allowing the defenses to soften, not all at once, but piece by piece. It means noticing when you reach for the old script, the one that says, I'm fine, when you're collapsing inside. The one that says, I don't care, when you're aching. The one that says, I'm over it, when the past still grips your throat in the dark. Resilience is not the performance of strength, but the capacity to face the truths of the unconscious, however unsettling they may be. And the hardest truth is this: you cannot do this for anyone else. Not for your family, not for your partner, not for the image you've projected. If you do this work at all, it must be for the part of you that remembers, the part that never stopped hoping for freedom, the child who once dreamed of being whole and then learned that wholeness had a cost. That cost was love withheld, attention denied, safety contingent on compliance. So the child made a bargain. I will become what they need if it keeps me close. And now, the adult must break that bargain. That break will feel like death, and in a way it is the death of the compliant self, the obedient self, the performative self. You will mourn what you had to become, but you will also feel something ancient stir beneath the mourning, a presence that was always yours, waiting to be remembered. That presence is your original self, before the loop, before the mask, before the silence. It will not come back all at once. It will emerge in fragments, in flickers, in moments when your reaction pauses and something softer speaks. In moments when you don't abandon yourself in the name of harmony. In moments when you choose honesty over approval. These are not miracles. They are rehearsals. Rehearsals for a life that no longer loops. A life that speaks from the source, not from the scar. But know this, the loop will try to reclaim you. It is familiar. It is persuasive. It will whisper, this is who you are. This is all you've ever been. It will seduce you with nostalgia for suffering, with the false clarity of old wounds. But you are not obligated to obey. Recognition severs the bond. The moment you say, I see you, the spell begins to lift. And what emerges is not some perfected self. It is a human one, flawed, fearful, but whole in its willingness to remain, to stay present, to feel, to speak, to stop editing the inner world to meet the outer one. This is where real resilience lives, not in strength, but in self-contact, in the simple, radical act of not abandoning yourself. So stay. Stay when it hurts. Stay when it's silent. Stay when the loop returns with 1,000 justifications. Stay not as punishment, but as devotion. Devotion to the truth. Devotion to the self that once had no witness. You are that witness now. You are the one who gets to say, no more repetition. You are the one who names the pattern. You are the one who chooses the rupture. There is no going back, and that is terrifying. But it is also liberation, to no longer need the trauma loop to feel real, to no longer shape your identity around what was done to you, to step beyond the story and into authorship. This is not transcendence. This is not spiritual bypass. This is the slow, brutal, honest work of becoming fully human. And being human is not about perfection. It is about presence. The presence to face your ghosts without fusing with them. The presence to feel your feelings without fearing them. The presence to love yourself not as an idea, but as a living process, messy, incomplete, and still worthy of respect. This is the turning point, where you stop running, where you stop pretending, where you stop outsourcing your wholeness to another person, another milestone, another version of the self. This is where you meet yourself as you are and say, I will no longer betray you for belonging. I will no longer abandon you for love. I will no longer exile you for survival. You are not a loop. You are not a role. You are not a product of what happened. You are the space in which it all occurred, and you are the one who decides what to carry forward and what to finally put down. The trauma loop ends not when the past is forgotten, but when it is remembered fully and no longer allowed to dictate the future. And that is ruthless resilience. But even here, even in this moment of clarity, the pull of the past remains. Do not mistake insight for immunity. The loop is persistent because it was once sacred. It kept you alive in an environment that could not hold the full weight of your being. That loyalty runs deep. So when you feel yourself slipping back into the old pattern, into people-pleasing, numbing, overexerting, disappearing, do not shame yourself. Shame is the loop's defense against awakening. Instead, pause. Witness. Ask not, why am I like this? But, who did I need to become to be loved? And is that still true? This is how we begin to rewire, not by force, but by awareness. Not by condemning our defenses, but by understanding them. Because every defense once served a sacred function. They were brilliant adaptations. Silence kept you safe from rage. Hypervigilance kept you attuned to danger. Dissociation gave you space when no one else did. Even your harsh inner critic, that relentless voice, once tried to protect you from the cruelty of others. So thank it, then let it rest. It is no longer the only voice you need. The task is not to erase these parts of you, but to understand the unconscious conflicts that sustain them. Only by bringing these hidden dynamics into awareness can the ego begin to mediate between desire and reality without being overwhelmed. These are not just thoughts. They are grooves in the nervous system, and they take time to unlearn. You will be tempted to rush, to skip to the part where you feel better. But better is not the goal. The goal is deeper, truer, freer. That means tolerating discomfort without anesthetizing it. That means staying open even when the urge to collapse into old roles claws at your throat. That means risking the very thing you feared most, being fully seen, and perhaps not being accepted. But that risk is the path to liberation. Because acceptance without authenticity is captivity. And you were not born to live behind masks. You were not born to endlessly accommodate the emotional poverty of others. You were not born to be the container for other people's unprocessed pain. That was assigned to you. And now, you have the power to return it. This is what trauma rarely allows us to do. Return what was never ours. The guilt that wasn't yours, the fear that was inherited, the roles you were cast into without consent. Give them back, not in anger but in clarity. What was given to you does not have to be carried by you. Your worth is not in what you hold, but in what you choose to release. And what remains beneath the roles, the stories, the scars, is something simple and almost unbearable in its simplicity. You. Not the version of you others wanted, not the curated self, but the quiet, breathing presence that always knew, the one that remembered even when you forgot, the one that cried out in symptoms and dreams and relationships that mirrored your wounds. That self never left. It only went underground into the unconscious, waiting for you to return. Not to rescue it, but to recognize it. That recognition is the beginning of everything, because once you see what is real, you cannot unsee it. Once you know what the loop was hiding, you can no longer pretend you are powerless. And here is the paradox of healing. The moment you stop trying to escape the pain is the moment you begin to move beyond it, not because it vanishes, but because it integrates. You are no longer in the pain, you are with it. There is a difference. Being in it is identification. Being with it is witnessing. The witness is what the unconscious needs most. A stable presence that does not flee, does not fix, does not explain away. Just sees. Just stays. And as you stay, something shifts. The loop begins to dissolve. Not because it's been defeated, but because it's been seen. Defense cannot sustain itself under the gaze of truth. The unconscious speaks in symbols, but it listens for honesty. Honesty that says, I see why I ran. I see why I hurt. I see why I needed the loop, and I no longer need to live there. The nervous system recalibrates not through force, but through safety. Not just external safety, but internal safety. The safety of no longer betraying your own experience, of saying no when it costs you approval, of saying yes when it costs you fear, of choosing the present over the past, again and again, even when the past seduces you with its familiarity. This is the rhythm of rewire. The body opens, the mind resists, the heart breaks, the self rebuilds, over and over. Each cycle a deeper descent, a higher return. You do not ascend out of trauma. You descend into it and reclaim what was frozen there. The frozen scream, the frozen need, the frozen truth. Let them thaw. Let them speak. The parts of you that once had no voice now have your attention. And that attention, that calm, unflinching gaze, is the medicine. Not analysis, not affirmation. Presence, contact. You meeting you without shame, without performance. And in that meeting, something else is born. Something the trauma loop could never generate. Trust. Not trust in the world is unpredictable. Not trust in people are fallible. Trust in you, in your ability to remain, in your capacity to tell the truth, even when it shakes the foundations, in your willingness to live without the loop, even when that means stepping into the unknown. The loop was the story of survival. Now, you write the story of presence. And presence, my friend, is the birth of freedom. Then let us end not with resolution, but with revelation. Because the unconscious does not crave closure, it craves contact. And if you've come this far, if you've listened, not with your ears, but with the deeper organ of recognition, then you already know something in you has moved. Not forward, not upward, but inward. And that is enough. You came here asking how to rewire the trauma loop, but that question now is too small, because what you've truly done is begin to dismantle the lie of who you had to become. You've stood at the mouth of your own history and refused to flinch. You felt the pull of the familiar lie that pain defines you, that silence protects you, that safety can only come through control, and you've chosen, however trembling, to disobey it. That disobedience is sacred. No one will see it. No one will praise it. It may not change how the world treats you, but it will change how you treat yourself. And that difference, though invisible, is what ends generations of repetition. The trauma loop was never about weakness. It was about loyalty, a fierce, unconscious fidelity to the version of you that needed to split in order to stay. So let us not shame the loop. Let us bow to it, and then let us leave it behind. You are not healed. There is no final healing. There is only remembering. And from remembering, choosing to live without the need to loop. Choosing to speak what once had no words. Choosing to stand without the armor that once saved you, but now only weighs you down. This is not freedom as fantasy. It is not bliss. It is not perfection. It is the quiet dignity of being able to remain in your own presence, undefended, unmasked, uncollapsed. This is ruthless resilience. Not the resilience they sell you, the kind that never breaks, never cries, never needs. That was performance. This is truth. You will still be triggered. You will still doubt. The past will still reach for you. But now, you will recognize its touch, and you will not confuse it for reality. You will remember, this is the loop. This is the ghost. I do not need to follow it. You will pause. You will stay. You will choose. And that choice, repeated enough times in the dark, is what rewires the soul. So go, live, not as a perfect self, not as a healed self, but as a whole, one fractured, fused, awake. The loop ends where you begin, right here, right now, in the silence, after survival, in the echo of your own voice, finally heard.